Project Psycho says, I feel like we anarchists got to have a bigger internet presence than we do now. Yeah, I mean, yes, bigger internet presence, but honestly, just a bigger in real life presence. We just need more people doing things in the real world. That's what is needed more than anything. Whatever ideology on the left gets out into the real world and starts doing anything that matters, that is going to be the ideology that flourishes. At this point, the internet is becoming increasingly diminished as a source for communicating information and radicalizing people, or rather, it is becoming incredibly distorted. All the conversations are becoming almost impossible. Barely anybody's actually changing their opinions. It seems like everybody is just locked into a death battle, and I see it's becoming less and less productive. The internet is just becoming a less and less productive place for spreading our politics, is what I'm noticing. I think that YouTube and I think that video format is becoming increasingly valuable because as AI spreads, as we have more of these like artificial or false people that are in the conversations, people are becoming less and less incentivized to have text conversations because they don't know who the hell they're talking to, or rather even if they're talking to a who. And so I think that things like TikTok and YouTube are becoming increasingly valuable because there is a face there. You can hear the person's tone. You know it's a real person. And there are a variety of ways that even if AI becomes really good at video content, that it will never be able to do certain things that real life human beings will be able to do with relative ease. It will be way harder for the AI to do those things, right? You know, like, for example, like right now, I can just hold up a random, oh, I just unplugged something. Yeah, there you go. See, and AI is also not going to do good at that, right? AI is not going to accidentally unplug itself, unplug its own video feed. Yeah, good job, Daniel. You did great. Daniel. Let's see if we can get this work. Oh, look at that. I got it working. Yeah, but like an AI can't just randomly hold up an object like that, right? Or you know, like whatever. Like, so I think that we are increasingly going to see a movement towards video format. And in that sense, I'm glad that I got the YouTube platform established before this took place, because beforehand, Twitter, I think, was one of the big ones. Twitter, Reddit, those are really big places for radicalization to take place. But I think in the current day, we're going to see those platforms enter decline because of the proliferation of AI. So Project Psycho, yeah, we could use more content creators on the internet, but I just want to note that we need people to be moving into the real world, doing real world things. I think that's probably the most important thing at the moment. People need to begin developing real life projects, need to begin bringing people together in the real world. That is what is going to make all the difference. And you'll find that our ideology will spread, will proliferate in measure to that. Now, obviously, I'm doing my work here on YouTube, and so I clearly don't think that it's a complete waste of time by any means. But I think that one of the problems that we have in the modern day is that the left is mostly an online phenomenon and has almost no connection with regular people. It is completely shut off into a silo of radicals that all talk about their radicalism and how radical they are. And there's basically no room for normal people to enter into our spaces or into any of our projects because we don't have any space for people who are learning. If somebody comes into our spaces and they don't already know basically all of the basics and they stumble or they make a mistake or they have a bad opinion, they're just going to be excommunicated. And so we basically have not created a movement that can interact with the masses. We are essentially a cloister of, a radical clergy, you might say. And I think that is essentially one of the biggest mistakes that we've made in the modern era. Confused Lefty says, at what point does an org having principles and not letting anyone who doesn't agree with them become purity testing that limits the size and influence of the org? I mean, I think we're engaged in it currently. So clearly we're in that realm as we speak. I was actually just talking with one of my partners about this just last night. You know, we were talking about people they know. Talking about people who are moving into further radicalism. They're starting to entertain radical ideas, but they're really not there yet. And they're in this place where they're asking, what do I do? And the liberals have all kinds of answers, fewer answers than ever, but still some answers, write your senator or whatever, whatever it might be, like these electoral answers, vote for X, and those answers don't require them to be purity tested. They can just do the thing. On the left, we say, join a leftist organization, but really imagine that some sort of like milquetoast liberal who's just starting to question this stuff, but is not all the way there, enters your radical left org or starts orbiting around your radical left organization. Imagine all of the stupid things that they're going to say, and then imagine how your fellow radicals would react to them having those stupid ideas. And you'll realize this is why the movement's failing. Right? There's not a place for people without like very radical politics who already understand all of the topics, who have already gone through this long period of education and self-criticism and so on. They don't have any place in our movement currently other than attending a protest. And historically, this was dealt with because the union was just something that was didn't really care about your level of radicalization. The union was just this fighting tool. It was a weapon, and it didn't matter if you were like too liberal or were not a revolutionary and so on. You had a place in the union. If somebody asked, what do I do? The answer would just be start a union, join a union, and that was enough. And they could do that and they wouldn't have been purity tested out of the union. In our organizations, they absolutely would be. And I think everybody who's here knows that. Everybody who's here knows that those people would not be welcome. They would be shouted at. They would be insulted. They would be belittled. They would be pushed out of the organization, 100%. And they wouldn't even really, honestly, be allowed to join in the first place. So I'm still not centered here. Still not centered. Yosef says it's not always safe to let non-radicalized people enter some orgs because of simple security concerns. Yeah, no, I mean, I actually agree with that. I'm not saying that like every one of our organizations should be open to anyone. I think that I'd like, for example, platform organizations, like what you might call the specifically anarchist organization in a specifismo, that needs to have a strict ideological platform. It does not need to be open to everyone, but we need to be creating projects which are open to, if not literally everyone, a lot more people than we are currently okay with letting into our spaces. So the way we deal with it in Cooperation Tulsa is you do not have to have all of our ideological positions in order to volunteer. You have to have them to be part of the organization. So we have a circle we call neighbors, and neighbors, we don't really like, interrogate their ideology. We don't interrogate how radical they are. If they're there, we appreciate their help. And I think that's a big part of it. It creates the internal pressure to move people from the outer circle to the inner circle.